truly are dealing with something off the planet.
It's right out of a 1950s science fiction movie.
One of the greatest secrets in history.
It's the most important story of the millennium.
What really happened at Roswell?
For decades, the Roswell incident has remained one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries, surrounded by rumors, denials, and eyewitness claims. Yet one story stands apart. Before her death, a nurse allegedly confessed that she had photographed the strange gray bodies recovered after the infamous crash. But if those photos really existed, why has no one ever seen them? The answer could change everything people believe about Roswell, and the truth may be even darker than the legend. The nurse who stayed silent. In the summer of 1947, a surgical nurse named Margaret Ellen Dodd was working at Roswell Army Airfield in New Mexico. She was not someone who chased strange stories or believed wild rumors. Her profession demanded precision, patience, and a sharp eye for detail. Every day she examined injuries, observed bodies, and looked for the smallest clues that could reveal what had happened to a patient. She understood anatomy better than most people, knew the difference between normal and unusual, and trusted what she could see with her own eyes. Those skills would eventually become the foundation of one of the most mysterious claims connected to the Roswell incident. For decades, Margaret kept her experiences locked away in silence. She never sought attention, gave interviews, or tried to convince the public that she had witnessed something extraordinary. Nearly 38 years passed before she finally decided to share what she remembered. In March 1985, she quietly sat down in a home in Albuquerque with a researcher named Daniel Acaron. It was not a dramatic press conference or a television appearance. It was simply a private conversation in which she finally opened the door to a memory she had carried for almost 4 decades. What Margaret described was both straightforward and astonishing. She claimed that, while working at Roswell Army Airfield, she had seen 2 small gray bodies unlike anything she had ever encountered during her medical career. According to her account, these beings did not resemble ordinary human patients. Their appearance was so unusual that it immediately stood out to someone who had spent years studying the human body. Believing the discovery needed to be documented, she reportedly photographed the bodies. But, according to Margaret, those photographs never reached the public. She said military personnel quickly stepped in, confiscated both the camera and the film inside it, leaving her with no physical proof of what she claimed to have witnessed. If her story was true, the only evidence she ever created disappeared almost as quickly as it was made. What remained was her memory, a memory she chose not to reveal for 38 long years. That silence has become one of the most fascinating parts of her story. Many people wonder why someone would wait nearly 4 decades before speaking. Was it fear of ridicule? Was it pressure to remain quiet? Or was it simply the burden of carrying an experience that seemed too unbelievable for anyone else to accept? Those questions continue to surround her account. In the end, Margaret's story can be reduced to a few simple facts. 1 nurse, 2 mysterious gray bodies, 1 missing roll of film, and nearly 4 decades of complete silence. Yet those few details have proven remarkably difficult to forget. Sometimes, the greatest mystery is not found in dramatic claims or sensational headlines. Sometimes, it lies in the long years of silence between the moment something is witnessed and the moment someone finally finds the courage to speak about it. Why keep quiet for so long? Why speak at all? And why does the space where the photographs should be feel louder than any explanation the government ever offered? Let's find out. The nurse's unforgettable Roswell encounter. Just after sunrise on July 8, 1947, the military base was only beginning to come alive. The usual sounds of soldiers preparing for another ordinary day filled the air. But for one nurse, nothing about that morning would be ordinary. Margaret was suddenly ordered to report to a heavily restricted hangar located on the eastern side of the airfield. Some old military records later referred to the building as Hangar 18, while others simply called it Storage Unit E, a plain and forgettable name that seemed designed to hide whatever was really happening inside. Before she entered, a high-ranking officer approached her. Years later, Margaret admitted she either could not remember his name or deliberately refused to reveal it. His words stayed with her, however. He explained that they needed her because of her medical training, not to perform surgery, not to provide routine nursing care. They needed someone with enough medical knowledge to understand what she was about to witness. According to Margaret, the officer spoke in an unusually serious tone, almost as though he believed the scene inside could overwhelm an unprepared mind. She followed instructions and passed through 2 heavy security doors. The moment the second door closed behind her, the atmosphere changed completely. The room felt unnaturally cold, much colder than the warm desert air outside. It reminded her of an operating room where temperatures are deliberately lowered. There was also a strange metallic smell lingering in the air, sharp and unnatural, almost like the scent of an exposed battery or fresh machine parts. It was unlike anything she had encountered in a hospital. Then, her eyes settled on the room's mysterious occupants. Lying quietly on 2 ordinary military stretchers were what appeared to be 2 small bodies. Their skin was an unusual gray, not the pale gray of illness, but a smooth, lifeless shade that seemed untouched by sunlight. Margaret estimated that each figure stood only about 4 feet tall. Their heads looked unusually large compared to their slender bodies, giving them an unsettling appearance. Their faces appeared almost featureless. She could not distinguish normal ears. Where a nose should have been, she noticed only narrow slits. Their eyes remained tightly shut, or perhaps, she wondered, they had no eyelids at all. What disturbed her most were their hands. She found herself staring at them again and again, unable to look away. Each hand appeared to have only 4 long fingers, with no visible thumb. At first, she described the skin as wax-like, but later she decided that comparison was not accurate. Instead, it resembled a thin, delicate membrane that seemed almost transparent. She even imagined that if someone shined a bright light beneath one of those hands, shapes or shadows might become visible beneath the surface. Margaret believed she remained alone with the strange bodies for somewhere between 12 and 20 minutes. She knew at least 12 minutes had passed because she checked her watch when she entered and again when soldiers returned. Yet the remaining time felt impossible to explain. Parts of those moments simply refused to fit into her memory. She insisted she had not fainted or lost consciousness. Instead, it felt as though certain minutes had slipped outside the normal flow of time, leaving behind only an unsettling emptiness that she could never fully account for. Was Margaret able to take any photograph of the bodies? Did she come prepared with her camera? Stay with us. The camera they couldn't erase. What happened next is the part of Margaret's story that has continued to fascinate researchers for decades. One small detail in particular has left countless people wondering what really happened inside that room. Margaret did not arrive carrying a camera, nor had she planned to document anything. Yet, resting quietly on a metal tray beside the nearest gurney was a Kodak 35mm Medalist camera, the exact type commonly used by the base hospital to capture medical photographs. Its presence seemed strangely convenient, almost as though someone had deliberately placed it there, or perhaps abandoned it after losing the courage to carry out the task. Acting on pure instinct and guided by years of medical training, Margaret picked up the camera without hesitation. Instead of allowing shock or fear to overwhelm her, she slipped into the calm, disciplined mindset she relied on during surgical procedures. She carefully photographed both mysterious bodies, just as she had been taught. She began with full-body images to record their overall appearance. Then, she moved closer, capturing individual sections before focusing on the smallest physical details. The hands attracted her attention more than anything else, and she took extra time documenting them. She also photographed the face of the nearest being from 3 different angles, making sure every feature was clearly preserved. Later, when asked how she managed to remain composed, Margaret gave a surprisingly simple answer. She said she felt no fear at all. The only word she used to describe her state of mind was professional. Her training had completely taken over, pushing aside the amazement and horror that might have frozen almost anyone else. That quiet moment did not last for long. Without warning, the doors swung open, and 4 military soldiers entered the room. There was no shouting, no panic, and no dramatic confrontation. One of the soldiers spoke in a calm, controlled voice, politely instructing Margaret to place the camera on the tray and step away. She obeyed immediately. Moments later, a man dressed in civilian clothing entered. Margaret insisted she had never seen him before and never saw him again after that day. Moving with remarkable confidence and speed, the man removed the film from the camera right there in the room. His actions appeared so smooth and practiced that Margaret believed this was not the first time he had carried out such a task. As soon as the film was taken, the mysterious bodies were quickly covered from view. Margaret was quietly escorted through a different exit, led across the airfield back toward the hospital, and instructed to return to work as though nothing unusual had happened. Surprisingly, no one questioned her further. No lengthy interrogation followed. Even more puzzling, she was never asked to sign a report, a secrecy agreement, or any official document. For many people, that missing paperwork has become one of the most intriguing parts of her entire account. In a military environment where nearly every significant event is carefully documented, the complete absence of any written record raises questions that continue to fuel speculation decades later. What exactly brought Margaret to the scene in the first place? How important did the mystery turn out to be? Stay tuned. The mystery that never ended. For many people, the Roswell incident remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in American history, and the story has continued to fascinate people for more than 70 years. It all reportedly began during a powerful thunderstorm in early July 1947 near Roswell, New Mexico. After the storm had passed, local rancher W.W. Mac Brazel is said to have discovered a huge area of strange debris scattered across his ranch. What made the discovery so unusual was that the material looked unlike anything he had ever seen. Witnesses later described the pieces as incredibly light, almost like thin metallic foil, yet surprisingly strong. They claimed the material could not be burned, was extremely difficult to bend, and always returned to its original shape. Even more puzzling were reports that some fragments carried mysterious purple markings that looked similar to ancient symbols or hieroglyphics, leaving many people wondering where they had come from. Concerned by what he had found, Brazel reportedly informed local authorities, who quickly contacted nearby Roswell Army Airfield. The military responded by sending Major Jesse Marcel, the base's intelligence officer, to inspect the strange wreckage. After examining the debris, Marcel later insisted that he did not believe it came from an ordinary weather balloon, a conventional aircraft, or any known missile. His comments would later become one of the strongest reasons why many people questioned the government's official explanation. Marcel's son also added another intriguing piece to the story, recalling that his father briefly brought some of the unusual material home before taking it back to the military base. According to him, the debris looked unlike anything their family had ever seen. The mystery grew even deeper when Roswell Army Airfield released an official statement announcing that it had recovered a flying saucer. The announcement immediately captured national attention and fueled excitement across the country. However, within just a few hours, senior military officials completely changed the story, stating that the recovered object was actually nothing more than a weather balloon. That sudden reversal raised countless questions and sparked widespread suspicion that the military was hiding the real truth behind the discovery. As the years passed, more people came forward with remarkable stories. Some claimed they had seen additional pieces of strange wreckage, while others alleged they had heard reports of small humanoid bodies being recovered from the crash site. A few even said military personnel warned witnesses to remain silent about what they had seen. These dramatic claims eventually inspired stories about alien autopsies, secret government files, and elaborate cover-ups. However, it is important to note that many of these accounts remain unverified, highly disputed, and unsupported by conclusive evidence. The U.S. government has consistently rejected claims of extraterrestrial involvement. Officials have maintained that the recovered debris was connected to classified military activities and later identified it as belonging to the secret Project Mogul balloon program, which was designed to monitor Soviet nuclear testing during the early Cold War.
Was not from a regular weather balloon. The wreckage was actually from a super-secret program called Project Mogul. Project Mogul was a military surveillance program.
Even with official explanations, public investigations, and decades of debate, the Roswell incident continues to divide skeptics, historians, and UFO researchers, ensuring its place as one of the world's most enduring and captivating mysteries. Was there any account that confirms Margaret's submissions? Could it really have been someone's cooked-up story? Stay glued. The nurse who knew too much. Among the many stories that have surrounded the famous Roswell incident for decades, few have captured people's imagination quite like the tale of the military nurse who was allegedly called upon to help examine strange bodies after the unidentified object crashed near Roswell Army Airfield in New Mexico in 1947. Although the story has become one of the most talked about parts of the Roswell mystery, it remains heavily disputed and has never been confirmed by independent evidence. Even so, it continues to spark endless debate among UFO researchers and skeptics alike. The story comes mainly from Glenn Dennis, a local funeral home employee whose account has fascinated investigators for years. Dennis claimed that not long after the reported crash, staff from the nearby military base contacted his funeral home with a series of highly unusual questions. According to him, they wanted to know whether the funeral home could provide several very small, child-sized airtight coffins, and also asked for advice on preserving bodies that had been badly exposed to harsh outdoor conditions. Dennis reportedly found the requests strange, especially because they did not resemble the kinds of inquiries normally made by military personnel. His curiosity only grew stronger when he later visited the military base while delivering medical supplies or transporting an injured serviceman. During that visit, Dennis claimed he unexpectedly met a military nurse whom he knew personally. He said she appeared frightened, nervous, and deeply disturbed. According to his recollection, the nurse urgently warned him to leave the base without asking questions, suggesting that something highly unusual was taking place behind closed doors. Dennis later claimed the nurse secretly told him she had assisted military doctors during autopsies on several small humanoid bodies, unlike anything she had seen before. He said she described them as having oversized heads, thin bodies, unusual hands, and unfamiliar facial features. According to Dennis, the experience left her deeply shaken and emotionally devastated. Dennis further claimed that the experience affected the nurse so deeply that she resigned her military position not long afterward. Before disappearing from public view, he said she asked him to promise that he would never reveal her true identity, fearing possible consequences if the story ever became public. Years later, former Detective James Clarkson interviewed Dennis extensively before his death. Clarkson said he believed Dennis sincerely told the story exactly as he remembered it, and never gave the impression that he was deliberately inventing the account. However, sincerity alone does not prove accuracy. Dennis never identified the nurse publicly, and investigators have never been able to confirm that she existed or verify any part of her alleged testimony. He eventually admitted that one name he had previously given for the nurse was entirely fictional, explaining that he created it only to protect her identity. Because no documents, eyewitnesses, or physical evidence have ever independently supported the nurse's alleged account, historians and researchers continue to view it as an intriguing but unverified chapter of the Roswell mystery rather than an established historical fact.
Then, in 1947, a local rancher found what he claimed to be a flying saucer that had crashed on his land. The incident sparked a UFO scare.
Despite its uncertain status, the story remains one of the most enduring and captivating legends connected to the alleged UFO crash. Could the unknown nurse in Dennis's account have been Margaret? Why is she just opening up now? Keep watching. The silence that defied decades. For 38 long years, Margaret carried a secret that could have changed the way people viewed one of history's greatest mysteries. That is a lifetime of silence. Yet, when compared with the passing of decades and generations, it can also feel surprisingly short. What makes her story even more compelling is the strange way the official account of the Roswell incident changed almost immediately. Right after the mysterious crash, the military confidently announced that it had recovered a strange flying disc, a statement that captured attention across the country. But less than 24 hours later, that astonishing claim suddenly vanished. In its place came a much simpler explanation, The object was nothing more than an ordinary weather balloon. That dramatic reversal sparked endless questions, fueled countless theories, and left many wondering what really happened. Even today, despite years of debate and investigation, the weather balloon explanation remains the U.S. government's official version of events. Margaret insisted that her silence was never forced by dramatic threats or frightening encounters. She never claimed mysterious agents appeared at her door, nor did anyone demand she sign secrecy papers under pressure. Instead, she described something much harder to explain, a silent understanding shared among those involved. Without anyone saying a word, everyone seemed to know that what had happened was not meant to be discussed. That invisible weight stayed with her for years, convincing her that the truth, whatever it was considered too shocking for the public. But that raises an unsettling question. If the official explanation was completely accurate, why would an experienced nurse remain silent for nearly 40 years? People rarely spend decades guarding the memory of an ordinary weather balloon. The extraordinary length of her silence becomes almost as intriguing as the story itself, suggesting that something far more significant may have happened than officials were willing to admit. When Margaret finally decided she could no longer remain quiet, she did not seek attention through newspapers or television interviews. Instead, she chose to confide in Daniel Karen, a former University of New Mexico archivist who had quietly dedicated years to gathering testimonies from individuals connected, directly or indirectly, to the Roswell incident. Working from a modest home office packed with towering filing cabinets overflowing with documents, Acheron was neither wealthy nor famous. Yet his quiet reputation for listening without judgment made him someone witnesses trusted with their most guarded memories. Why did Margaret choose him? And why wait until 1985? Her answer carried the sadness of someone watching history disappear. At 61, she had already seen many of the nurses, orderlies, soldiers, and recovery workers who supposedly knew pieces of the story pass away without ever speaking publicly. She grew weary of seeing the number of silent witnesses shrink year after year. To her, it was no longer about fear. It was about time running out before the people who remembered the truth were gone forever. Was Margaret the only nurse at the scene? Were other health workers called upon for examination? Let's find out. The missing file deepens mystery. Acheron refused to dismiss Margaret's astonishing account as just another unbelievable story. Instead, he treated it as the beginning of a much larger investigation. For the next 3 years, he carefully searched for other medical personnel who had been stationed at Roswell Army Airfield during those mysterious days of July 1947. His determination eventually led him to 4 former staff members. Yet finding them proved far easier than convincing them to speak. 2 immediately refused any discussion, making it clear they wanted nothing to do with the subject. A third, a former nursing aide whose identity remained hidden at her own request, admitted she sensed that something highly unusual had unfolded inside the restricted medical area. Although she never witnessed the event herself, she vividly remembered being instructed by a superior officer to remain inside the hospital wing and avoid asking questions or wandering elsewhere. It was a strange order, especially considering the official explanation claimed the base had merely recovered an ordinary weather balloon. The fourth witness shared a story that added another fascinating layer to the mystery. Corporal Thomas Hyde, who served as a medical supply orderly at Roswell Army Airfield from April to December 1947, agreed to speak with investigator Thomas Acheron during a telephone interview in 1987. Unlike some witnesses who stayed anonymous, Hyde allowed his real name to be published, giving extra weight to his account. He remembered receiving unusual orders around July 9th or 10th that sent him into a highly restricted section of the base where he had never been allowed before. His task seemed simple at first: refill a medical supply cabinet. But something about it immediately caught his attention. The cabinet had not run out of supplies through normal use. It had been completely emptied on purpose. Hyde carefully restocked it with specimen jars, examination gloves, precision measuring tools, and sensitive scales used for handling biological samples. At just 22 years old, he followed his orders without asking questions, believing it was simply another military assignment. Years later, however, those memories began to seem far more significant. One detail remained impossible for him to forget. The examination gloves he replaced were incredibly small, much smaller than the standard gloves used by military medical personnel, leaving him to wonder who or what they had been intended for. Acheron also took great care to interview every witness separately, making sure none could influence another's recollections. Although their stories differed in a few minor ways, they contained enough remarkable similarities to suggest they were all describing separate pieces of the same deeply concealed event. His investigation uncovered another unsettling clue. Base photographic records from September 1947 listed 7 rolls of 35mm film used for medical documentation during that first week of July. 6 rolls matched identifiable medical case files. The 7th pointed to case number 1147MMMM, yet no corresponding file could ever be located. One government archive claimed it had been transferred elsewhere, while the receiving facility insisted no such transfer had ever occurred. A missing file alone proves little, but when combined with disappearing records, unusual medical supplies, and quietly consistent witness accounts, the mystery becomes far more difficult to dismiss. But how many pictures of the gray bodies was Margaret able to take? Could these images possibly explain the unsolved mystery? Stay tuned. The Roswell film that vanished. Margaret later claimed that she managed to take about 20 photographs inside the strange examination room before anyone stopped her. She said she began by capturing wide shots of the entire scene, carefully documenting everything around her, just as she had been trained to do as a nurse. Once she felt she had recorded the room itself, she moved closer to focus on one of the small gray bodies lying on the table. She wanted to preserve every unusual detail as accurately as possible, believing that careful observation was part of her professional duty. According to her account, the figure's appearance was unlike anything she had ever encountered in her years of medical work. As she examined the being more closely, Margaret paid special attention to its hands. She recalled that it had 4 unusually long and slender fingers, each covered with a fine textured pattern that looked completely unfamiliar. Nothing about the skin resembled that of an ordinary human patient. She searched for signs of breathing or movement, but found none. Even so, she admitted she could not say with certainty whether the figure was dead or simply unconscious. That uncertainty stayed with her for the rest of her life. If the photographs she claimed to have taken had survived, they might have become some of the most significant and controversial images ever connected to the Roswell mystery. Instead, the camera reportedly disappeared. The film was never seen again, and the official case file seemed to vanish without leaving any trace. Years later, researcher Daniel Acheron devoted much of his career to documenting Margaret's remarkable testimony. He carefully collected interviews, notes, and supporting information, believing her story deserved to be preserved even if others dismissed it. Before his death in 1993, Acheron reportedly feared that his research could disappear. To reduce that risk, he made photocopies of his work and distributed them to 11 trusted colleagues, hoping that at least some copies would survive if anything happened to the originals. Those concerns appeared justified after his passing. Reports claimed that many of Acheron's original papers disappeared from his home when several unidentified individuals, described only as looking official, arrived and collected boxes of documents. Exactly who they were and under whose authority they acted has never been clearly established, adding yet another layer of mystery to an already puzzling story. Margaret herself passed away in 1991 without ever publicly retelling her account. She avoided interviews, never sought fame, never published a book, and lived quietly until the end of her life. Whatever she truly witnessed remained locked in her memory. Today, only a privately shared summary, preserved through surviving photocopies, keeps her story alive. Rather than proving one massive, carefully organized cover-up, the story paints a different picture. It suggests that evidence can slowly disappear over decades through misplaced records, missing files, deceased witnesses, and broken chains of custody. Each lost document makes it harder to determine what really happened while making the mystery even more compelling. Even today, the biggest questions remain unanswered. What did Margaret actually photograph on July 8, 1947? What was recorded on the mysterious seventh roll of film marked Case 1147, MMMM? Why was a camera waiting inside the room? And why was no paperwork required before she used it? Whether these events reveal an astonishing hidden reality or simply one of history's greatest legends, the missing photographs, vanished files, and fading eyewitness accounts continue to keep the Roswell mystery alive, leaving many to wonder if the lost film is still hidden somewhere, waiting to be discovered.
Unearthed a top-secret mission that had long been forgotten. It offered a much simpler and earthly solution to the Roswell mystery.
So, what do you think about the mysterious event at Roswell? Do you really think the mystery can fully be solved? We'd love to hear your opinions in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe.